CFOs are going beyond simply reporting results. They're influencing businesses. In fact, they are shaping strategy. That belief sits at the heart of COVORO's CFO community, a platform where we bring forward meaningful conversations with finance leaders operating at scale. Today, we are joined by Kuntal Kumaar, Group CFO and Executive Board Member at Group SNS, a diversified group operating across retail, manufacturing, and real estate. He has led major value creation initiatives, overseen acquisitions, strengthened governance frameworks, and embedded AI-enabled performance optimizations across businesses. In this session with Kuntal, we'll explore his career and what he believes to be the 4 phases of a finance career. We will also explore the pillars of strong CFO leadership. We talked about why compliance is becoming a business enabler in the UAE, AI's real role in finance, and finally how the CFO's role is evolving towards what he calls the Chief Future Officer. Let's dive right in.
So hi Kuntal, welcome and congratulations for being in the list of the top 20 top UAE CFOs. First of all, welcome and thank you for your time. Yeah, and just I just wanted to start off with could you walk us through your own journey? I mean, we just want the audience to understand about where you started from and how your journey has been and how you arrived where you arrived today.
Absolutely. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here to share my experience as a group CFO. So over a period of time, I have almost 20 years of experience. I started my career, and to summarize and simplify, right? For any finance professional, there are 4 phases of journey. You start as a steward, you convert yourself into an operator, you elevate yourself as a catalyst, and finally you become strategist. Now, just to correlate that with my career journey, so when you join and start your career, you act as a financial analyst / controller, focusing primarily on the cost angle, just to understand. And that's where out of the business cycle, I would say shareholder value protection is where your career starts with, right? Now, next, as an operator, you move towards shareholder value creation. That means you elevate yourself from a business finance and look into more holistically from a revenue, cost, supply chain end-to-end basis to create that value in the ecosystem and the value stream. The next phase, I called as a catalyst, which is basically once you decide in your career that you have to deliver that much of value, how can you accelerate that value creation? And that's where the objective come into picture. The different enablers and tools what you have, like definitely now we are talking business intelligence and AI across, similarly ERP implementation, so that whatever the objective you decide, you deliver that on a faster possible way to accelerate and enable the value for the shareholder. And the 4th one, which primarily I would say most of the modern CFOs role are, which is acting as a strategist, and that means it's the 4th phase of the journey, doing a co-piloting with the CEO to drive the business. So in a nutshell, I would say the career summary is the pre-2020 era. It used to call it the CFO. The definition used to be, I would say, the chief facts officer. That means it is more of a post-mortem. Whatever you have done, the data is already there. You are just reporting the data, not creating that much of value. After that, the era where we are in is a chief financial officer. That means definitely you are elevating yourself from a reporter to an influencer and value architect, along with the CEO as a co-pilot. And the way I see it, the future gonna be 2026 onwards, the CFO is called Chief Future Officer, where taking the technology embedded within the finance, creating the value trajectory for the ages and the future, just to make sure that we accelerate the value creation and the value protection much faster versus what we used to do decades ago. And that's where I am today after working with Majid Al Futtaim, Procter & Gamble, and right now leading as a group CFO for Group SNS. This has been always my career journey in terms of starting from a steward and becoming a strategist.
Thank you. That was pretty interesting. And many of our audience, as we had already at one point discussed, that what we are also doing is kind of reaching out to the audience who is at a larger scale, who are not necessarily CFOs, but are at this point probably ambitions are to grow, and they are in their place where they're growing. So what you're saying kind of makes sense, but it also demands a certain level of learning and growth and all that. So which I do believe. I mean, you're making it sound easy, but I know for a fact that it isn't easy. But I'm sure there is a drive. But I think that those are things that you did where you kind of which helped you kind of evolve and grow in the way you have grown.
Absolutely. I think there are few foundational aspects, right? I think if we really look at a finance career, right, what do we do effectively? In a very simple terms, we protect value, we create value, we accelerate value, and we communicate value. Now, that is a very, very simplistic way. But now if we really look at finance, historically, be it at across level, becomes a gatekeeper and I would say the custodian for shareholders to ensure that the right things are happening in the organization, right? If you take out the history, many of the financial pitfalls, many of the large organizations got impacted significantly, leading to a bankruptcy, right? And that is because of the lack of corporate governance, lack of compliance, leading to certain malpractices, right? And finance tend to be the gatekeeper for that from an audit, from internal control, from a compliance standpoint. I think this is something which is the foundational aspects and one of the building blocks to have a stronger finance career. The second part is, I would say, the data accuracy is very, very important, because as you are across different levels, as you elevate in your career, even starting from analyst to a senior level personnel, as the stakeholder and the audience keeps on changing, it's a moving goalpost. But one thing is constant, is having the right source of truth and the data accuracy when you communicate. It's continues to be a pivotal importance, especially with the context of organizational complexity with multiple ERPs, multiple systems. I mean, if the question is asked, what is the gross margin for this product? The answer has to be 30%, and not gonna be too much of explanation. When the too many explanation come into picture, that means the clarity is not there, and that's where it is a finance role. And with the modern architecture, the finance roles also depends on the data, like the data accuracy with the right flow continues to be important. So as I mentioned, first is a compliance pillar, second is the data pillar, and the third one is a more of an influence pillar, where across level, across different stakeholders, is very important to also drive the business towards the right direction by taking the right influence. Let's say a project comes, and whether you as a finance leader approve the project or reject the project or seek the right level of details, I think that is where the due diligence come into picture, that whether you really see the project is going to add value from a long-term as well as a mid-term standpoint. If there is a short-term investment needed, that is completely okay, right? And from a key KPIs, like the traditional, what we call NPV, IRR, ROIC, compared to the weighted average cost of capital, whether the project is significantly delivering value over a longer period of time, I think that influencing the stakeholder, leading to the right direction, because you got the technical expertise, others don't. They rely on you as a custodian, as a trust, I would say trust management committee, to really ensure that you dictate the business towards the right direction. So I would say these are the three fundamental pillars: compliance, which is the foundation aspects, data management, and I would say lead with data-driven decisions, leading to a value-driven decisions. This is something which is the second pillar. And the third one is having the right ability on the communication to influence the right stakeholders. That continues to be the important area for finance professional success career.
So in the third part that you said about influence, which I'm guessing has a lot more, which I would say in some way, quote unquote, leadership qualities, right? Because you're driving a project, it's ownership, and then you're driving something. But the first two, I'm curious that over the years, you said about 20 years have passed that you've been doing it. Do you think it has evolved? Do you think you've seen a change in both compliance, data accuracy, where how things were happening? Or maybe data accuracy has really, you spoke about single source of truth. is it really that strong? Is it really reliable? I'm just kind of trying to understand, how things have changed for you, how things have evolved, and you've seen a transition, surely.
Look, different organization has a different maturity in terms of the data, right? Now, there are like a lot of small to medium organization, right, who are still probably running the business without ERP system, where still it is fragmented, I would say, data model or the data source. Just to give you an example, right? I mean, when you are leading the business, you need to have a holistic understanding of all the possible data, right? Which is the customer data, marketing data, sales data, revenue, plant, manufacturing, depending on the business operations, right? On the supply chain. Now, what happens, and I have seen many organizations, even at the large scale, there are a lot of fragmented data and the systems which are available, right? And all the systems are not talking to each other, and that creates silos. That means you have only the limited visibility to the area what you are managing. But for somebody at a senior level to make a decision, that person needs to understand the entire paradigm of the business angle to really make the right call. And that's where the importance of the data, I would say, the coherence come into picture. So imagine a world where all the ecosystem are talking to one single source of truth, where you have all the data together at point in time for you to, and it acts as an enabler for us to take the right decision, so that it is comprehensive enough and risk mitigated, I would say. This is primarily on the data angle. On the compliance piece, over a period of time, the compliance angles has evolved, right? And if you really think about UAE or GCC region, where currently I'm based in, right? The corporate tax has been introduced. That means when the tax regime is changing, automatically the requirement for the tax filing and the transparency becomes much more elevated, right? Similarly, the e-invoicing is coming, right? And that also kind of integrate the entire picture in terms of starting from the invoice clarity across the value stream and the supply chain. That kind of increases and enhances the governance across different continents and organizations. Sometimes I would say few organizations are on the leading position in terms of, even if there is no regulations in the economy, they are kind of stepping up on the compliance factor, because ultimately gone are the old age days where compliance has been considered as a cost center. Now it is not a nice to have, it is a must have, right? And it should act as a business enabler to do the business much more, I would say, integrated and ethical way. And that's where, in some of the regions, when automatically the government is taking the call, that kind of helps the organization also to continue shaping that journey and becoming robust more and more in the coming years.
Thank you. Just one question, because you mentioned about compliance and you also mentioned about e-invoicing. So now with e-invoicing coming in, and considering I have some understanding of that part, but so what do you think will change now, considering, I think by come 1st January onwards, you have to have, 1st January 2027, enterprises have to become e-invoicing and compliant with that particular part of it. What do you think changes in terms of internally, in an organization, or for you as a CFO, when you see that, okay, we better step up and this is what we need to do in terms of how we need to align, and what do you think will change? I'm sure you've asked your colleagues, which are probably back in India or maybe Malaysia or wherever, where they have already implemented, or perhaps you have first-hand experience with it. What do you think changes there? I'm sure it's a small aspect of things. It's not really the entire thing, but it still is something which changes a lot of things within an organization, right?
Absolutely. Look, this is like any other journey of introduction of new taxes or changes of the law, right? The internal system, the culture, and the people mindset has to adapt with a new way of working. Because I'll just give you another example, right? When India, and that time I was based in India, the GST came into picture, right? There was a complete change in terms of the way of working, because pre-GST era was different, post-GST, but it is for the right reason. How do you drive along with government in terms of the transparency and the data flow, just to make sure the business is much more compliant. Similarly, for UAE, I would say e-invoicing, or let's say Pillar 2 tax regime standpoint, the idea is more compliant, more integrated and I would say transparent operation, which will kind of help the business to live longer, right? And then from that angle, this is primarily I would say the capability internally from a people aspects, system capability, and third is more of a cultural shift, that this is the new way of working. These are the three fundamental shifts gonna happen. Of course, organization has to invest to get the benefit over a period of time. So there are few things which is compliance linked, which is needs an initial investment from a system readiness standpoint. But when things are new, there are a lot of exploration also is going to happen, right? I mean, and that is something, because this is a foundation stone from the government standpoint to bring more visibility, more transparency to do the business better, and also invite many more emerging businesses to do the, I would say, do the business more transparent and I would say legitimate way to build the future over this part of the world. Very similar to like any other continents have already gone through that particular journey.
Could you touch upon in terms of, like you mentioned, I mean, what you primarily also talking about is change management, right? I mean, it's a lot of changes are happening in the system. So I'm sure in your experience, and this once again goes back to people who are not necessarily probably your peers or people who are in the space, how have you tackled that? I'm sure you must have had a lot of experiences with that kind of thing. What's your learning there, or how you've kind of approached this whole process? Because I'm sure at the end of it, I mean, at the core of it, it's everything that changes, but it's kind of similar in I'm guessing in the overall structure. What's your take on it? How have you seen it or approached it?
It's a fantastic question. So for any kind of change, be it external or internal, there has to be a clear framework to drive the effective change management from an organization standpoint, right? And when I say effective change management, because there have been a situation where organization also face ineffective change management, right? And many of the cases, it's a balance between bottom up and top down. So I would say the framework is very simple. The step one is stabilize. The step two is simplify. Third one is optimize. For any change management, these are the pillars. And let me touch upon a bit more, right? So first, for any change, it starts with the top, like the vision of the business. Why are we doing that, right? I think from many of the cases where organizations fail, that the vision stays into the boardroom and never cascade down to the granular level, to the organization who are actually heavy lifting the majority of the work. I would say the frontliners, or let's say the junior employees, right? But at the end of the day, the leaders needs to also understand, because ultimately what has been discussed in the boardroom, if does not resonate or cascade down as part of the cultural and the mindset shift, the organization will not be able to lead to the change management effectively. And that's where it is a difference. So the first thing is setting up a vision is very important, but also aligning the vision with the entire organization at the enterprise level is even more important, so that the 100% of the organization clearly see that vision, think they are part of the journey. So there are many part of the decision making, right, where we call it involved, influenced, or informed. It should not be informed decision making. It should be involved or to some extent influenced, because if it is informed, that means decision is already been done. You need to follow, you like it or not. Organization tend to follow, which is involved or influenced, tend to do better on a longer period of time, where employees feel valued irrespective of their hierarchy and the level, and they can clearly see and contribute, and probably potentially also bring much more ideas which on the table, which probably the management might have I would say the blind spot, right? And that kind of makes the business planning and the change management much more effective. Again, going back to the framework, what I mentioned, for any change management, first is understanding the pros and cons, and the stabilization period is very important, because from a cost optimization, or let's say the resource planning standpoint, stabilization is very important as a first phase. I might always recommend to the senior stakeholders not to go for the cost optimization in the first phase, because it allows the stability first to run the systems and the process effectively before you start cutting corners, which might lead to a disruption. And that's where it comes to that once you settle on the stabilization phase, comes to the simplification phase. That means how can you do the same objective in a much more simplified way without losing the final goal and the vision, right? That comes as the second. And the third one, as I mentioned, optimization. Once you reach to that level of, let's say, stabilized and simplified stage, you can decide whether AI will do it or somebody who is as a human factor, human personnel who will be doing that work. And that's where come the more of a productivity discussion. How can we kind of make it more optimized structure, which I would say right now is the era going on where across we'll see some tough calls has been taken across the organization to make sure that everyone takes the best benefit out of the cost P&L standpoint.
I'm going to take a left turn right now. I'm just going to ask you generally, what's your day like? When does it start? How are you? How do you? What's your ideal? Or I won't say ideal. Let me not go into ideal, but like a normal day like. What's it feel? When you get up, how do you make time for yourself? What do you do to keep your mind sharp? Because as we grow, it's all about a lot of decisions and prioritizing things which are not necessarily clearly prioritizable, if that's the word, because everything seems important to begin with. So how do you kind of keep your mind sharp, and what do you do? What are you?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, it's a great question, but there are certain frameworks which is across industry-wide leaders follow. There are something called 7 habits of effective leadership, effective people. But again, those are few things probably is quite common in terms of doing the exercise, making sure your mind, I would say the state of mind is in a position where you can think clearly and drive the business forward. But for me personally, I would say the days might differ depending on what is the agenda for the upcoming months look like, right? Now, definitely as a finance professional, generally the month ends are always heavy, right? I mean, because there is a lot of activities from a preparation standpoint come into picture. And that's why the way I plan it for a day or a week or a month standpoint, the clarity of thought is very important when you are not into the hustles and bustles of the daily operational aspects. Step back, more of a take a break or go for a short vacation. And that is the time where I can kind of step back and think about what I'm going to do for the upcoming quarter, right? First, I decide the top line priorities and then eventually flesh out a plan in terms of from a structure standpoint on the how piece. But it's very important from a vision standpoint to have the what piece first before the how piece, just not to jump the gun. So again, just to come back to your question, how do I plan my day? So in the morning, definitely starts with an exercise or with a healthy breakfast. And then while coming back to office, I already charter in my mind how I am going to manage the day in terms of structured planning standpoint, having all the meeting scheduled and the effectiveness. Because my policy, or I would say philosophy, is very simple. And this is something what one of my, I would say, coach historically in Procter & Gamble taught me, that if time is key, right? For any meeting, what I see is more than 30 minutes. First, my objective is to reject it. The simple reason is that what my leader used to tell, even if you're working for 2 years on a project, but if you're not able to articulate that in a 30 seconds elevator speech, probably you did not get that right. And that is something what I also pass on that message to my organization, to be better communicator and to be more effective, that within the shortest possible time, how do you bring out the articulation of the message? What do we need? Why are we here? What resources are needed? What decision you need? And then the meeting closes with the minutes of meeting with who needs to do what, by when, at what capacity, and how do we close the topic faster? So then we move on to the next. And that is something what I follow always as effective, I would say, team management as well as self-management to maximize the overall work output with a minimal possible of investments of the time.
So primarily you're talking in some ways a lot to do with clarity, right? I mean, if you have enough clarity and understanding, you keep it short. You don't talk too much. Let me also talk about considering that we are in the age of AI, and I just wanted your perspective on it. And you have touched upon it slightly, and I'm not saying that you haven't, but What do you see how do you think it's moving? I mean, see the future with AI, with agentic AI, and things the way it's evolving and the pace that it's evolving. How do you think the future is going to be for your role, one, and for the finance department? And that is one. Of course, I don't want to go too much into companies and all that, but just as in your space of your specialty, rather.
No, absolutely. AI is phenomenal and it is maturing day by day in terms of helping. So it's basically acts as an assistant for you to take a better decision, right? And in simple form. I'll just give you one simple example, right? Because over a period of time, when we grow the business or drive the business, it's very important to also have an eye externally what is happening, so that we are not only inward focus across the organization, what I have led. And that's where when you are driving, let's say, I'm just taking an example. You're driving a FMCG business in the food category. Now you're growing at the 7% top line and 15% bottom line. How do you assess whether it is good, bad, ugly, right? One of the key parameters is how your competition is doing or the market is doing versus that you are doing. So even if 7 and 15% on absolute might look a decent number, but we need to understand the context. And the region where we are playing, right? Historically, what used to happen, that every quarter when the financials gets closed from a, let's say, annual report or a listed company standpoint, we used to do a detailed exercise for our competition versus us to really make sure that we understand what is our performance parameter look like apple to apple compared to our peers, right? And that used to be always a big exercise to make sure that where we stand, it is not only just internal, it should be an external focus also. With AI, I have one script written which basically takes the consideration of 20 companies who I want to read. The day annual report closes, I get the entire analysis one shot, right? So that entire effort, what we used to do manually, is now fully automated, right? And that is kind of a power. And that's why I always believe for the strategic roles, AI is not going to replace them, rather than AI will act as a better assistant to lead to a sharper and effective decision. And that's why my advice to all finance professionals or even the business professional, go for the skill set which is not replaceable by AI. Any mundane and autonomous task, which kind of more of accounting or let's say AP, AR standpoint, definitely gonna be automated, and which we are already seeing. Whereas there is a strategic influence, decision making, negotiation, external facing management will gonna thrive with AI being as a helping hand for them.
If you had to kind of look at, if you had to, I mean, since part of us, we are in technology, and if you had to ask and reach out saying, hey, this is the gap, this is the pain I experience, what is the kind of solution you would be looking for? Meaning when I ask that is because like AI is solving a lot of things. And of course, it can't solve everything that is there. But do you think there is something that you feel that this is the gap and I just don't know if this can be solved? Is there something like that you've experienced that you feel that, hey, I wish there was a solution like this which could really solve my thing? I'm probably mining for some, solution, but either ways. But I'm just trying to understand from your perspective as to.
So look, I mean, there are three things, right? Which is act as the enabler for any organizational success: people, process, and technology. Now, where I would say things mostly fail, because the gap in people and process, people think technology is a solution for that. That is never the case, because technology's portfolio role is a multiplier role, not a solution provider role. Just to give you an example, if an organization wants to do an ERP implementation, can AI help in that particular case? Or what kind of gap it might be? First, we need to start with ask the business questions. Why do we need an ERP, right? What is the current process or technology which is not helping us to achieve the objective? Many organizations fail over there because they don't have the clarity. Why do we need an ERP? It's just because SAP S/4HANA is being implemented across organization. When we pick up the phone, we should also do it. But the clarity needs to be there first in terms of why do we want to do it, what business objective we're gonna achieve. Second piece is the process, and this is something which is super important because AI or automation or analytics, anything, is a garbage in, garbage out. If you give a wrong command to AI, automatically you will get the probably not relevant information, right? It's basically all the IT system or the technology systems are like that. If the feeding in the data is not clear or not clean enough, the output what we will be getting is not relevant enough to make an effective decision. And that's where comes the second pillar, which is process enabled by people. Because for any organization to succeed for the next 15, 20, 50 years timeline, foundational process in terms of the entire value stream is very, very important. And this is what I always see when I transition from one organization to the other. It becomes eye-opening for me that how people are investing in technology without fixing the basic foundational process aspects. And the process can not run on its own. You need also the capable people to run that particular process in an effective way. And that's why for me, the priority cycle is very, very clear. Invest in the right people, which I always do, who will develop the right process and which will lead to a right technology implementation, delivering that multiplier impact, not the other way around.
I'm actually just wondering in terms of, since you have, I'm sure you have a network of CFOs and other people in a lot of leadership positions and by now in multiple countries and all. How do you see is there a global trend that you're seeing a shift happening? I'm sure, AI could be one part of it, but overall, do you see a shift happening in your as a role as a CFO globally, as you see over the years that is coming? Do you feel that, these are the 3-4 things that are really, it's not happening right now, it's not possible, but you're seeing it happening in the years to come?
Definitely. One of the emerging trend right now, I see a lot of need for fractional roles compared to a full-time role, right? And that's why if you go to LinkedIn, probably will see almost everyone kind of are ready to the fractional. And there is a positive pros and cons towards that, right? Because right now, what over a period of time, the professionals understand, because at the end of the day, let's be very clear, in the corporate job, pressure is there. Pressure impacts the mental and the physical health. And that's why having the right healthy diet as well as the exercise kind of help, those are not I would say the only solution, because root cause needs to be fixed. And for that angle, many people have kind of evolved both finance, I would say finance more, but the other functions as well, towards a fractional role, where the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined and they are doing many more things within a shortest possible time. And that is something what I really believe, that eventually imagine a big organization, but they don't have probably at a senior level full-time employee, because it's gonna be a very much board structure. Board is temporary. Board doesn't come to office every day. It is only for the specific decisions which needs to be made monthly basis. Board's role come into picture. So even for the senior leadership standpoint, eventually the world will evolve into more fractional roles, where with your limited investment of the time, you would be able to do much more, because with automation and AI, lot of, I would say, mundane tasks will do its job, to leading to all the data which is needed to make those effective decisions. So, and that is my takeaway in terms of how the industry will move towards, right? Now, I'm not saying across continents, few of the part of the region where the business is much more matured, where probably the new dynamics are limited, the fractional roles are much more. Whereas for emerging regions like India or probably Middle East and Africa, probably still there is a way to go, because when you are doing a geographic diversification, product diversification, doing a merger and acquisitions, right? Fractional will take a backseat. You need somebody who is kind of doing the full-time assessment to really be and drive that ecosystem forward. And that's where when there is a more actions going on, I would say still it's gonna be era of full-time role, whereas for more stable businesses, fractional roles can take over. And that's why I see this industry shifting.
So I guess maybe the smaller companies would kind of opt for fractional roles. Do you think that's fair to say that right now?
Right now, I see it's a mixed. Definitely, smaller companies adopts fractional role just because not from an optimization standpoint, because they cannot afford probably a full-time role. It's a cost question, not a choice question. But for a larger organization, right now, the organization which I am currently in, the Chief Corporate Governance Officer, which is also a big pillar for, let's say, taking the transformation, is currently doing a fractional role, right? And the organization is surviving because, again, when we have the clarity on the vision, when you have a clear charter, who needs to do what by when, with a clear responsibility and accountability, which we call as the traditional RACI metrics, I think many of the roles can be optimized from a full-time role to a part-time role without diluting the effectiveness.
I think this has been a lovely conversation. Any more questions to ask us? But I mean, I'm saying that congratulations once again for being on the list, and we are really happy to have you. And I hope to see you soon on some other questions or the podcast or other themes that we are kind of going to evolve in the future. And let's connect on that, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. And thank you so much for conducting this. I hope this message might help some of the professionals, and I'm personally available to coach, guide, help the community as in when needed.
Kuntal, we have some rapid fire questions for you. All right. So one word your team uses to describe you. Quickly.
Inspirational.
Inspiration. Okay. The most overused word in board meetings. When you go to board meetings, one of the words that you keep hearing all the time.
I would say we should do it.
We should do it. Okay. One task, I mean, in your role that you secretly dislike. I mean, I know I'm saying secretly, but you dislike you. I mean, it's not your thing. Or what would that be?
I would say politics management.
Okay. Okay. I'm just going to ask now one word. So you fill in the blank. A good CFO is someone who what?
So creates the vision, takes the team along, and finally deliver the results and stay accountable.
The one thing I'd always double check is
before the board meeting, the data in the slide should be accurate, because that is something which puts a question mark on the credibility.
Interesting. This is an interesting question. If I weren't a CFO, I'd be what? You would be doing what? If you weren't a CFO, what would you do? What would you be?
I would have been a actuarial scientist, in terms of from a more of a data analytics, and then leading for more modeling, and which kind of relevant to my profile with a computer science as a background.
Okay. So last few more. One myth about CFOs you'd like to break. One myth about CFOs you want to break.
They always say no.
Okay. And one thing you'd change about how finance is viewed.
I want to transform this function from I would say, bookkeeper towards value enabler.
Okay. And one last one, which is an advice you'd give a first-time CFO.
Build the strong team.
Build a strong team. All right. That's a great note to end. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much.
And we hope to stay in touch and we'll connect later. Yeah.